Hello there, folks. Welcome to this video here. A video that's going to be pretty hardcore and pretty in-depth. In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to use the electrical routing package. This video is going to be very lengthy, so definitely have some coffee ready and be ready to tackle a pretty interesting application found in NX. Now, before I get started, I'm going to make a few things clear. This is only showing you how to use the electrical routing package to route wires. It is not going to show you the harnessing package. That's a completely different package. And if you're looking for that, feel free to reach out to us and we can arrange something for you. But this example is mainly here to show you how you start with something like this that's pretty much already assembled, and how you use the information that's already here to assist you in getting the final wire routing paths. Okay, so we're going to go through it from the beginning all the way to the end. Okay, so as you can see here, I have this assembly, and it's basically just an enclosed component here. I have some Molex connectors I put here, just dummy connectors, and of course I have these little guys here, right? The waterproof, I always forget what these are called, but you can look at them here. They're waterproof, so we need to qualify these as well. And of course, I have my little clips right here. That's where the wires will need to go. And then I have this little hump over here that it kind of has to jump over, and then we'll make him go through these little clips over here, going to this final box over here. Okay, so the thing is already assembled. It is now up to us to take this data and make the wiring harness out of it. Now, this video is going to be time stamped, so I'll put the timestamp in the description so you guys can see the processes involved in doing all of this stuff. Okay. So with that being said, the first thing that you need to do when you are doing wire routing is you need to qualify your parts. I actually have a separate video that talks about qualifying the parts, but we're going to do it here again because we actually need to qualify multiple things. And one of them is going to be a connector, one of them is going to be a device, a fixture, and things like that. So we're actually going to use a lot of these different types of classifications here. Okay, so that's step number one. We need to qualify our components, and in this example we actually have three components that we need to qualify. The first one is obviously this board right here, that what I'm calling the network switch, right? This one needs to be qualified because it has two Molex connectors, right? And these are the same part numbers as you can see right here, so that needs to be qualified. These individual grip waterproof connector things, these need to be qualified. Now, I know that there's a specific name for these, but for some reason I'm forgetting them, so forgive me for that. But these need to be qualified as well. And the clips also need to be qualified, right? Because our wire needs to go through that. I also have an additional component that I need to qualify, which I'm going to go ahead and take a look at right here. So let me go ahead and expand this guy. So I have the 1118 here. Okay, so that's good. So let me go ahead and open up the other component that I need to qualify, which I believe is this guy right here. So I haven't added this to the assembly yet, but I will need to add it because that's what plugs into these components here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start qualifying our components. In order to activate the electrical routing package, you have to go over here to Application, and then you're going to go ahead and activate the electrical package right here. Once you click it, you are pretty much inside of the electrical routing package. All right. Now, this is at the assembly level, and we're going to need that in a second. But first, let's start opening the components in a separate window that we need to qualify. You don't have to do this, but it is a little bit easier to kind of navigate it. Okay. So let's start with this guy here, which is the network switch body. I'll go ahead and open that in a new window. Okay, and this is what the geometry looks like. I need to qualify this component, so I'm going to go ahead and head on over back to Application, turn on Electrical there. And in order to qualify it, we're going to go over here to the Part More, and we're going to go ahead and execute the Qualify Part command. Okay. Now, we're not going to cover a lot of the stuff here. Some of this is administrative, some of this is for you to mess around with, okay? But what we are going to do is we're going to create a fitting here that is a device. Now, you can think of the device as being the thing that the wiring harness is going to plug into. This is a network switch, a device, right? So it has two plugs that my harness or my cable needs to plug into. So I'm going to classify it as a device, okay? In this case, I'm going to choose a fitting here. Again, this is not talking about the harnessing application. The harnessing application requires a little bit more in-depth knowledge of this. But for us, all we're going to do is just choose a fitting. Now we can do that by right-clicking on this and then hitting New. And as you can see, it allows us to create a fitting. Now we need two of them since we have two connectors here, right? Or two plugs. I'm going to go ahead and choose a midpoint on face option, okay? And my first fitting is going to go right there. Now you can see that it's using the midpoint there. That face that is highlighted is the face that the other connector that I showed you earlier is going to mate with, okay? Now we want the fitting to be pointing normal to the face, right? In the direction that the other connector is going to come into, right? So this is perfect. We don't want it to go, inside of the connector because then otherwise that will be wrong, all right? An extension is totally up to you, right? So this gives it additional length to be straight if you decide to route your wire from here. We don't have to do that for this example, so we'll leave it on 0. But we are going to give it a name, right? Let's just call it, port_1, just like that. I'll go ahead and hit apply, and I'm going to do the same thing for this one over here, just like that. And I'll go ahead and call it port_2, just like that. I'll go ahead and hit OK, and you can see that I have 2 new ports for my device. All right, I'll go ahead and hit OK on this, just like that. And as you can see, our component is now qualified. Okay, you have to do this for the devices that are going to have things connected to them. I'll go ahead and hit Control S on this to save it. It's always a good idea to save. If you lose your work, well, you're pretty much screwed, right? Unless you saved it. So hit Control S to save it. So if we go back to the master assembly over here, you can see that obviously our network switch body doesn't show the ports. If you look at my videos on reference sets and arrangements, I talk about what reference sets are. I'm not going to cover that here. But if you right-click on the network switch body, you can hit Replace Reference Set. And if you choose Entire Part, you can see that the ports that we just created are now showing up on our component there. See, so they're both right there. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's focus on these little guys here. These are all the same part numbers. So let's go ahead and open this in a new window. We only need to do one, right, because they're the same part number. So I'm going to go over here into Application. We're going to do Electrical. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go to Qualify Part right there. Now, this one is a little bit more involved, okay? And again, I'm just showing you some very simple techniques, okay? This one is going to be, we're going to leave it on, let's see, let's try fitting, although I think that's more geared towards the mechanical routing package. So, let's go with maybe, I guess fitting should work for now. And then let's go ahead and make this into a fixture. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and right click and hit New on the fixture there. Okay, so what fixture means is that the component is being classified as just a pass-through device. It's not really connecting to anything. It's not acting like a connector. You just have to pass your harness through this device. And that's exactly the point of this particular component. Okay, in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it on the default name. It doesn't really need anything special. Point and vector is actually perfect for this. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of rotate them all around. I'll use the center of this arc here like that. And as you can see, it wants to point it in this direction here. Okay, I'm not really a fan of that. I want it to go in the direction that the wiring harness has to come out of, right? So I'm going to go ahead and flip this vector here. Now this one, I am actually going to give it a little bit of an extension, okay? And I probably should have measured this, but let's just take a guess here. Let's say that 50 millimeters should be pretty good, right? So it's going to stay straight for 50 millimeters. And the back extension, I'm going to say that maybe 20 millimeters is okay. So the extension would be from this point here that I just created to somewhere out here. That's 50 millimeters. The back extension is from here to somewhere out here, which is 20 millimeters is what we specified. That's pretty much it for this one. I'll go ahead and hit OK there. And as you can see, there's my fixture port. Now, you can always change this later, right? You can change the classification, but I'll just leave it on fitting for now. I'll go ahead and hit OK. And that takes care of the second component that we need to qualify. Okay, so you're seeing a theme here, right? So let's go ahead and head on over to the harnessing clip, which I have right here, right? Again, these are the same part number. And if you're feeling pretty cheeky, you can go ahead and tackle this yourself, okay? You can skip through the video and, we're pretty much going to do the same thing. We're going to do a qualify part. We'll do a fixture, right? And we're going to go ahead and choose the same thing, point and vector, excuse me. And we're going to go ahead and choose specify origin point, right? In this case, this is such a thin clip, I don't think we'll have that much of a problem. For the extension, I think I'll do 0.5 inches and 0.5 inches here. Now, you might notice that this is in inches, right? So, we're mixing some units up here, but it should be fine. Did you know that you can type in, for example, 13 mm and then hit enter, and it automatically converts it for you? If you didn't know that, well, now you know, right? 13 mm. Let's do 13 mm for both, okay? I'm not going to give it a name. We're going to leave that alone, and that's pretty much it. We'll go ahead and hit OK. Perfect. We have everything in our assembly now qualified, okay? So if I go over to the assembly here and I replace the reference set for the this part number here, the plastic submersible cord grip, right? I'll hit replace reference set entire part. There's the routing port, the fixture routing port. Now notice how the fixture routing port has a different type of vector compared to, say, the network switch, right? It's completely different. That's to signify that this is simply a fixture port. It's a pass-through port, okay? We're going to do the same thing for the harnessing clip here. I'll hit replace reference set entire part. And as you can see, we have these here. Now, it should go without saying that you should make a reference set that has just a solid body and the routing port. It'll actually make your life a little bit easier. That way you don't have to see all this stuff. These are simple shapes, so of course it's pretty simple, right? But for more complicated things, if you show the entire part reference set, it can get really messy. So it's totally up to you. And if you have questions on that, remember, we have the video that covers reference sets on our channel as well, okay? So we're like 75% of the way there because remember, there's one final component that we are missing, and that is the actual the connector that's going to plug into here, right? And I already opened that. I believe I have it somewhere over here. That's this guy right here, okay? So we need to qualify this guy as well, but this guy is actually going to have two different types of ports, okay? So we're going to go over to the application, go to electrical, okay? And we're going to go ahead and head on over to the part more, qualify part, okay? Now, as I told you, we're not covering harnessing here, but I am going to show you how to prep this if you are going to, put this in the harnessing application. Since this is a connector that has 6 pins, okay, one of them is going to be a multi-port. Okay, but first let's change this to a connector here, just like that. We're going to go ahead and do a fitting for the first one. That's the one that this guy needs to mate with, right? So this front face that you guys see right here, that's going to be the fitting port because this is the one that plugs into the device. The one on the back that's going to have all the wires coming out of it, that is going to be your multi-port, okay? Let's take care of the fitting port here. I'll go ahead and hit new, just like that. And this guy, I'll go ahead and choose midpoint on face, just like this. And I don't really need an extension. I want it to mate perfectly with the other device. So I'll go ahead and just enter 0 here. And then I'll go ahead and hit OK. I'll go ahead and create another fitting, but this time it's going to be a multi-port. I'll go ahead and hit new on multi-port there. Okay, and I'll go ahead and select this guy right here. Okay. Now in the extension, I'll say that, maybe I want to give it, let's do 1 inch, right? 1 inch extension there. And then we'll go ahead and hit, actually, you know what? Let's do maybe 0.25 inches. Let's go with that. And then we'll go ahead and hit OK. Now, at this point, you've pretty much completed everything that you need to in order to qualify these components, okay? So now we're gonna go ahead and hit OK. Now this multi-port, that's pretty much where we're gonna end it. There is an additional process if you're gonna do a form board drawing or if you want the actual, pin-to-pin connection. But again, that's a completely separate package. Reach out to us if you need help with that. Nonetheless, we have the components all qualified, okay? Now it is time to actually start making the harness, okay? So this is now step number 2. Okay, before we do step number 2, here's a couple tips from me to you. Ideally, your company should already have a bunch of these connectors qualified for you. That way, you don't have to do this every single time. The only thing you would have to qualify that I see a lot is a device, and that's it. You usually already have these guys in a library somewhere that are already qualified for you, okay? So that's the biggest tip that I can give you. All right, folks, so now that we've done all of the hard work, it is now time to actually start using the information here to help us route the wire path, the moment of truth, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to go over to assemblies and we have to hit this little button here that says new component. We're going to create a new component that is going to house our wiring harness assembly, right? So I'm going to go ahead and give this a name, network switch cable, right? Just like that. I'll go ahead and hit OK on that and we are ready to roll. Let's go ahead and hit OK on this as well. And there's our component, okay? Now we need to make this into the work part, and you can go ahead and do that by double clicking on it or right clicking on it and then hitting make work part. That does the exact same thing. All right, so now that we have this guy here, we need to use the concept of the wave geometry linker. And the wave geometry linker is another advanced command that we're not going to talk about heavily here. But the main thing you need to understand about the wave geometry linker is that it copies geometry and it copies assembly position. For what we need it for, we really don't care about the geometry, but we do care about the assembly position because that is how our harness is going to derive its paths, right? So in order to use the wave geometry linker, you have to go to the assemblies tab and you have to go over here to the wave geometry linker. From here, you will go ahead and choose the routing object dialog, right? So go ahead and pick this guy here. And now you need to select the routing objects that will take part in helping you route your path. For example, I'm going to use this port right here, and maybe I'll use this port there. I'm definitely going to use all the ports found in the harnessing clips right here. And, let's say that it's going to shoot through this one and into that port there. So these are the ports that I'm going to use for this example, okay? Now we can go ahead and hit OK on this. And if you look at your part navigator, you can see that our ports are in there successfully. They are flawless, okay? Now, the next step is to place our actual connector in the device, right? And we can do that by going to Application and then entering the electrical package once more. From here, we'll go to the command called Place Part, located right there. And if you had a library, this would be where you would get it from. I don't really have one established on this computer. So I can go over to the Load Existing Parts option. And let's see, we're going to go ahead and grab this guy. This is the one that we qualified in our earlier step. Go ahead and select this as your part that you're going to place, right? And this menu is pretty massive, so you might have to kind of minimize it and then hit OK. At this point, NX wants you to select the routing port of the device that this is going to plug into. And again, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this is within work part and components. I'll go ahead and select this port here, right? This is, of course, the female end, so I'll go ahead and click it. As you can see, it is placed correctly. The routing port is correct, but it is facing, actually, it is facing the right way, but it's just rotated wrong. So I'll go ahead and expand these settings here and placement solutions. We want to go ahead and rotate it by 180 degrees. There you go. Right now, it's perfect. I need to do this again, so I'm going to go ahead and hit apply, and then I'm going to go ahead and select this port over here. Same exact thing. It needs to rotate 180 degrees, just like so. Congratulations. You have now brought in the component or the connectors and plugged them into the device, right? So you're already banging this out very quickly. Now, the final step is to start routing using one of these two commands. You can either use the spline path or the linear path, okay? I'm going to use strictly only the spline path for this particular example. I'm going to go ahead and execute the spline path command there, and then I'm going to go over and make sure that I don't have anything funky here. I do not, but I do want to go to space reservation, and I want to tell it that I'm going to do a circular stock, and it's going to be 250 thou. Okay, now we can go ahead and start selecting the ports that will be used in our spline path. Okay, and this is where it gets really easy, because all you really have to do is just click the ports, and it automatically infers most of the information for you. Okay, so let's start with this guy here. I'm going to connect from here. There's one to this routing port. And, it's getting a little bit of a pain in the butt. I'll go ahead and choose routing objects. That might be easier, right? This is the linked one that we had, right? Now, you got to be careful, because if you don't have it set to within work part and components, you might accidentally select one that is not wave-linked. And unfortunately, this menu is pretty annoying, because after you click something, it resets itself. So just, if you can remember, then, just use the one that you wave-linked. I know I picked this one, so I'll click that one there. And as you can see, that looks pretty good. Let's keep going. There's that port there. I mean, look at how easy this is. Click, right? I'm going to go into this port here. Click, right? And let's just keep going. Okay, there's this port here. That's our fixture ports, right? That's just a wire pass-through. Nothing fancy going on there. Okay. Then, of course, I do remember that I am going to shoot through this one. Now, see, this is where it gets even more annoying, right? You have to go over here, and we're going to pick this guy here, right? And then this is going to connect to this guy here. Now, I'm not really sure why, but it seems like the extension that I specified for these pass-through things is really not playing a role here. But that's not a big deal. Let's go to the point that is controlled, or that controls this particular section, which it seems to be point number 8. So let's go ahead and just kind of see if we can make this a little bit bigger, and it looks like we cannot. So we're going to have to scroll through this. Let's see. Point number 8 is right here. All right, so let's give this a little bit of more forward extension. Let's try maybe 1 inch. There we go. As you can see, it's straight for 1 inch, and then it shoots into the connector. That's perfect. And I think I also have that same problem over here, and I believe that happens to be point number 2, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, this is the guy right here. And again, same thing. Let's do a forward extension of, let's say, oops, sorry, that's the wrong one. Let's do a back extension in this case. Let's do 1, like so, right? Because we're going in the reverse direction for this example. Good, that looks pretty good. So we'll just leave it on 1 and 1. It's not going to hurt anything. And that looks pretty darn good. So you can see that this does adopt our number for the extension, right? You can see that here as well. It doesn't just shoot, tangent-wise into this fixture port. It does obey that number that we put in there for the hanger or the clip, okay? But if you hit OK, it's like, oh, well, Jose, we're done, right? I don't know. Do you see this guy right here? It's like, well, there's definitely something going on here, right? It's interfering with this little hump right here. And at this point, you have a couple of options, right? You can either give it some slack, or you can add another point in order to, kind of use it to move the wiring harness out of the way, Okay, and that's exactly what we are going to do. You can make changes to the spline path by simply double clicking the routing spline, just like so. And it looks like I can give it a new point by moving my mouse over to this new point section here, and I can go ahead and click anywhere along this path. Let's say that that's pretty good right there. It adds a new point, but it doesn't really do anything. What you have to do is you have to click it like so, and then it gives you this little coordinate system. You can then use this coordinate system here to orient your model, and you can start moving it around, right? Holding down the left mouse button on those vectors. And as you can see, that seems pretty good. If you really want to be even more picky about it, you can bring it closer. But that looks pretty good to me. Okay, so we're just kind of skipping over that little hump just like that. You can also go to spline shape and give it some slack by points or by moving the points or between the points, right? This is very good for, very simple service loops, or if you have a fixed length that you want to give this, this would be where you would do it. Okay, you do need to give it a vector, but it will solve that for you. Okay, but this is good enough for me. I'll go ahead and hit OK, just like that. And there you have it, folks. You have successfully routed your wiring harness, right? I mean, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And if you look and open this in a new window, you will see that it has the connector that we're using, right? In the BOM table right here or in the assembly navigator, and it has the stock, it has all the routing ports necessary. You're flawless. This thing is absolutely beautiful, okay? Now, another thing that you get with the Wave Geometry Linker, of course, is you have the ability to have your harness change in case the position of, say, the clips change. For example, if I go back into my master assembly and then we realize, oh, crap, this guy's wrong. We need to move this guy, right? That's not a big deal, right? I can move it. Let's say I use move component here. Let's say I move it over there, just like that. You can see that because of the nature of the Wave Geometry Linker, our wiring harness goes with it. It's very, very nice. That's the whole purpose of the Wave Geometry Linker. And you can test this with any component in this assembly. I can move any one of these, and the wiring harness will adapt. As an example, maybe I'll choose this guy, right? I'll move the second component over here, right? This network switch. Let's say that I move it somewhere up here, right? Oh, it looks like I have it fixed. That's fine. Let's say I move it up here. Hit OK. Boom. See that? It follows it. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. It's beautiful. Okay? Now, if you had your wiring harness set to a fixed length, or if there were some service loops, then you might have to go in there and change them. But other than that, this thing works exactly as you expect it to. Hopefully this video gave you an idea on how the routing package works. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave them down below. Thank you so much and take care. Bye-bye.